Hello again, everybody, and welcome to your favorite NFL podcast show, Students of the Game. Here I am with Elijah Freeman, and we will be recapping Week 10 of the NFL in review. Elijah Freeman, your big wins this week.
Well, we could start off this big win segment by going to the first game that was played during this Week 10 of the NFL season. That was a divisional showdown with those hideous uniforms, which apparently colorblind people couldn't see.
Yeah, I didn't mind them, but you hated them.
I hate monochromatic uniforms. That's another thing for another podcast. But the Bills-Jets game happened, and it was kind of an ugly game to watch. The Bills got out to a big lead. Then the Jets came roaring back, but the Bills, under LeSean McCoy in particular, really got this done. He had 19 carries for 112 yards, and especially kind of salted the game away when it looked like the Jets, if they could get a chance to get the ball back, might have a shot. But McCoy kind of runs things down and grinds out the game. But really, the Jets in this game, they had the ball at the 5-yard line. Could have kicked a field goal to try to make the game closer, instead go for the touchdown and don't get it. It was just a very bizarre game, but it was a big win for the Bills because now they are 5-4.
And they got that win without Sammy Watkins doing anything.
That is correct. Sammy Watkins had
targeted 4 times, that's it.
If I was to look this up here, Sammy Watkins...
3 catches, 14 yards, 4 targets.
Oh, look at that. He's on top of the stats more so than
Actually, I had that memorized, but that's all right.
But yeah, I mean, the Bills just kind of got out to this big, giant lead, but then the Jets made it a bit of a comeback. But now they're tied up at 5-4, and the Bills have a tiebreaker in this case. So it was a big win for Buffalo. I think it was a big win for Rex Ryan because he went back to beat his old team up in the Meadowlands on Thursday Night Football.
Okay, well, yeah, I think the biggest win this week was definitely the Arizona Cardinals taking it to Seattle at home in Seattle, and really dominated by the Cardinals for the first half. I mean, they led 19-0 early in the game. Seattle could get anything going on offense, and Carson Palmer was phenomenal once again. I think he deserves to be on the radar of MVP right now. I'm sure Brady's getting more of the praise, but that's also for good reason. But I really think Carson Palmer's having one of the best years he's ever had. But yeah, this is a big win for the Cardinals, and we'll talk about what this does to Seattle later, because that puts them in a really tough spot at 4-5. But yeah, Arizona 7-2 and a huge win against the division rivals, and they did so. I mean, Larry Fitzgerald and Malcolm Floyd both had over 100 yards receiving. And they had their way with Seattle secondary for the most part.
That is true, and that's kind of rare. Malcolm Floyd had his 2 touchdowns. Larry Fitzgerald had a lot of big catches. And they got Jermaine Gresham involved with a touchdown to kind of seal the game. But they were down in this game 29-25 after the
Seahawks came back.
The Seahawks had come back, just scored a touchdown off of a strip sack, and Bobby Wagner was rolling into the end zone. And there was, it's in the fourth quarter, they're down, but all of a sudden 2 beautiful long touchdown drives, and Carson Palmer... Andre Ellington had a 48-yard touchdown run to kind of put the game away. This was a big win because now Arizona is they're going to win the division. I
think it's near a lock at this point.
If the Seahawks had managed to win this game, they'd be 5-4, and the Cardinals would be 6-3, and Seattle would have that tiebreaker. But right now, the way the Rams looked as bad as they did against the Bears, and then you have the other team in the NFC West, which escapes me at this point. Who am I missing, Justin?
The 49ers, buddy.
The 49ers are completely irrelevant. So, look, the Cardinals are going to win this division. Now they have the fish to fry of maybe they can catch the Panthers, but the Panthers keep winning. So maybe not. I think the Cardinals are as dangerous as anybody because their offense is ridiculous.
Seriously, really love what Carson Palmer has done. If it wasn't for Tom Brady, he'd be my MVP vote for sure.
Well, his 23 touchdown passes are pretty impressive in their 9 games. He does have the 7 interceptions, and Brady has not thrown nearly as many as that. But the Cardinals just keep making plays, and they've got all kinds of weapons, offense, defense. This is a legit team, and they had a huge win, as you were correct.
Yeah, so we got one team leaking out of the playoffs in Seattle, one team leaking themselves right back in there with a big win for Kansas City and Denver.
The Kansas City Chiefs, remember they were done probably 3-4 weeks ago,
yes,
because they just lost Jamal Charles to an ACL tear. They had lost 5 games in a row or something. I thought, okay, the Chiefs, they're absolutely toast, finished, over, done. And they had beat some not so very good teams on the way to get here. But now, what they just did to Denver, laying the smack in the Mile High City, was unbelievably impressive.
I really loved what Kansas City did. They came out in this game, let's see, what did they lead? Was it 26-0 in this game?
Yeah, before they got a couple of couple garbage touchdowns in the fourth quarter from the Broncos.
And And Peyton Manning played probably one of the worst games he's ever played in his career.
I don't think that's a probably. I think that's hands down the worst game
and
he's
we'll
ever
talk about
played.
Peyton a little bit later, and what the Broncos are looking at for the rest of the season. But yeah, big win for Kansas City, and Charkandrick West had another big game. Not so much on the ground, but receiving, led the Chiefs in receiving yards by quite a bit. Also found one in the end zone, especially with the 80-yard touchdown pass is what got him there. But yeah, the Chiefs are knocking on the door for the wild card in the AFC again, and it's huge. The other team we had a big win this week, the Patriots again, on the road against a team that usually has their number, and I thought that this is a big win for New England when it comes to, winning a close game.
That they haven't usually had to play in the course of this season, and kind of blowing people out like it's 2007 all over again. But I mean, stop me if you've heard this one before. The Giants and Patriots played a really entertaining, down to the wire, remarkable, fun game.
The Patriots and Giants are always good TV. I tell you what.
I mean, this happened 8 years ago. This happened 4 years ago. I don't think they're going to meet in the Super Bowl this year, like the last. They seem to do every 4 years. But in this case, I really thought the Giants could easily have salted this game away, and basically, if the Beckham touchdown that wasn't, I guess, but kind of was, or
I think that was the right call on the field. This time.
I agree as well, but it was initially ruled a touchdown, and you could probably make an argument, got the catch and feet down, but just didn't kind of actually keep the ball. So yeah, I would agree that's the right call, but otherwise, they're going to lose that game in all likelihood. As it is, they drive down for a 54-yard Gostkowski field goal, he's probably the best kicker there is in the game.
So yeah, I was going to touch on Gostkowski just because I love kickers, and Gostkowski is my favorite in the entire league, and for good reason. He's made 31 field goals in a row, and this one was huge, 54 to win the game. He's not as good as Vinatieri's legacy, obviously, right now, but I think it's very possible that Gostkowski could get there if he keeps making big kicks like this one.
Well, I mean, in this game, Brady was not necessarily... 26 of 42, so not a great completion percentage. He had 334 yards, that's impressive. He also threw an interception, which is rare. He had his 2 touchdown passes. Gronkowski got involved, like he always does. I mean, Rob Gronkowski, just absolutely monstrous statistics in this game. 5 catches for 113 yards. He has 8 touchdowns on the season.
One of those was 76.
Yeah, he just... Well, I mean, but just making huge, big plays. The thing is... The really unfortunate thing, and we'll kind of get to this a little bit more later, is that Julian Edelman had broke his foot in this game, and I think that is going to mess with the Patriots to some extent, and it did in this game even.
Well, let me flip the coin. I think this is an even more important win for the Patriots just because they won it without Edelman. I watched the second half of this game, and I could tell that Brady was really missing Edelman. He's his go-to guy other than Gronk. He's one of the best route runners in football. And he really missed him, and Amendola stepped up a little bit near the end, which is good, and he's going to have to without
he had his
Edelman.
10 catches for 79 yards. I mean, that's a lot of... He was catching a lot of balls.
And he's going to have to do that the rest of the year. The problem is he's never been on the field for all that long. He's a pretty fragile guy, I would say. So we'll see. But yeah, we'll talk about the Patriots again later. Elijah, who you got for some big losses this week? And there were quite a few.
There were. I think... There is no bigger loss, and maybe this is just me as a Homer Packers fan, but there's no bigger loss in the NFL than the Green Bay Packers. Okay, Justin, I have been waiting to talk about this for the last couple of days.
We have this for the second part of the discussion.
No. I cannot wait to talk about. I'll leave it at this for now.
You have the floor.
They had lost 2 games in a row to the Broncos first on the road, and then to the Panthers. The Broncos made them look really terrible. They were behind by a lot against the Panthers, but made it at least close by the end of the game. So I was like, okay, that's 2 straight losses to actual good teams. But everybody assured me, don't worry.
I was your first. I was the first to assure you.
You and others on social media, NFL announcers, people prognosticating games, don't worry. Okay, they've got the Lions coming back in. My biggest worry about this game, going into it, was that the Packers were going to kind of just roll over Detroit and then feel like everything was fine after they'd kind of been exposed by really high-level competition. But it was the furthest thing from my mind that they could lose to the Lions.
At home.
At home, where they had not lost to Detroit since before you or I was even a twinkle in our parents' eyes, okay? And they lost to this iteration of the Lions. Last year's Lions would have been one thing. They went 11-5 and probably should have won a playoff game. This year's Lions were 1-7 and just fired their general manager. They had been terrible. This was probably the worst team in the league. It did have the worst record in the league. And yet the Packers at home, where they hadn't lost in quite a while, they managed to score all of 16 points with this offense that is led by the, I guess, supposedly greatest QB in the league, who isn't looking like...
Shots
You can't lose to the
fired.
Lions.
Wow.
You cannot lose to the Lions and manage to only score 16 points against one of the worst defenses in the NFL. And you managed to get just those 16 points. And the Packers had all these chances to win the game, too. The Lions kept being like, we don't want to win. We're seriously, get here, have the game.
They gave it away multiple times.
The Lions kept trying to give away the game, and the Packers kept actually giving away the game. There was this field goal that somehow looked like, one of my bad golf shots. They had an onside kick to get this field goal, which is not even close. And they could have had the 2-point conversion to tie the game, but no.
What are the odds that the ball goes right to the Lions' best player, probably maybe of all time other than Barry Sanders, to Megatron, and he drops the football? Right then, I was like, Dad, it's over. I was watching the game with my dad. I was like, Dad, it's over. This is typical Lions. We see this. I've seen this script many times before. The game's over. They gave it away to Green Bay again. I couldn't believe Megatron dropped the ball like that, and still the Packers weren't able to get it done.
I don't know if that field goal it didn't look blocked. I'm not sure if Mastey's hand hit I don't know. I'm not sure if Crosby just absolutely shanked it. Somehow they wound up losing this game, but I'm not going to put that so much on what happened at the end of the game as what happened during the rest of it. They had an opening drive field goal and then didn't score again. Not even another field goal until there was 5 minutes left in the game. This is an offense that's supposedly so potent with Aaron Rodgers, and I know the cast of wide receivers isn't what it used to be because Nelson's not there and Montgomery is now hurt and stuff, but Devontae Adams was hyped up all offseason. James Jones started the season hot. Randall Cobb is your $10 million a year wide receiver. None of these guys are getting separation. Their offensive line seems to have regressed because now Rodgers is facing more pressure. He managed to go all of 35 of 61, continuing the fact that his completion percentage on the season is not all that impressive. If you want me to just wait for this page to load here, he has managed a 63% completion percentage. That is the lowest of his career, even lower than his first season as a starter. It's not good. The Packers aren't good. They were vastly overrated with their 6-0 start. Everybody was kind of like, oh, Super Bowl. But you can't even beat the Lions? No, I'm sorry. They are in huge trouble. This is a big loss because when you lose to 2 unbeaten teams on the road, that's one thing. When you can't beat the division rival, who's not even really a rival because you'd beaten them 24 times in a row, you have huge problems. And the Packers they're in huge trouble because the Vikings are surging right on past them, and they have to play them next week. And yeah, it's just not good. It's not good. It's bad. You had your rant about the Falcons in the past.
You deserved a rant.
This is my Packers rant. They lost to the Lions.
You deserve it. I think you do. For my thoughts from what I have seen, normally I'd be the one to back up the Packers because I know how good they are and good they can be. And I would say that this might be a wake-up call for Green Bay, and I think it's going to be a wake-up call, but it's not exactly a positive one, especially dropping 3 in a row. If they would have come into this game undefeated and then lost, I said, well, maybe this might be a wake-up call. But 3 losses in a row means that there's big things going on. And I watched, this offense doesn't have any rhythm. It doesn't have any rhythm. The wide receivers aren't open. You talked about how they're not getting any separation. Devontae Adams, I'm calling you out, buddy. I mean, I realize you're only second-year man, but you need to figure it out because the Packers need you big time. I mean, they targeted him, 19 times in this game or something like that? Something crazy.
He came up with 10 of them, I guess.
He had 10, but he did have a couple drops, including one in the end zone. It was a nice play by the DB, but still, you would have liked to see him make the play.
Well, if he comes up with that one, then they would have tied the game up at 18 and gone into overtime, and then who knows exactly, but...
Yeah, and the fact that Lacey's out doesn't help. And also, Bakhtiari got hurt in this game, the left tackle, and I believe Lang got injured later, so that's something Packers fans need to watch out for. As you said, the offensive line hasn't been playing as well.
Well, that might explain why James Starks managed less than 3 yards a carry.
Right.
I mean, it's just not... The offense is terrible.
And I think it has a lot to do with abandoning the run game so soon. I'm sorry, but the Packers get a little too pass-happy, and it's tough right now that they don't have as much wide receiver talent as they used to be. That's when they need to be trying to run the ball more. And they're always putting that defense out on the field right away. They had so many 3-and-outs. How many times did Mastey punt in this game? 7?
I don't know. 9. He had 9 punts in this game.
I would love to know the last time Mastey punted 9 times. Probably never.
It's not good.
Credit to the Packer defense, I guess, for what they did against the Lions offense, which isn't saying much.
Well, but then again, they had the Packers had just scored, so it was 12-10. And I thought, okay, now the Packers have momentum, get a stop on defense, even hold them to a field goal, and things will be just fine. But you know what happened? They allowed, with really, really, really bad tackling on that one play to Golden Tate that got him down inside the red zone. And then it was just like, so the defense couldn't manage that. I know that, yeah, okay, so you held this putrid offense that had really been underwhelming to 18 points, which is probably about what they've been getting all season long, the Lions. So that's not all that remarkable. But it's just, the Packers could not seem to figure things out. And after those two losses, I think they probably were just, I think they took the Lions and said, okay, well, we'll be fine. We'll just beat the Lions, just like I thought. But you know what? You can't do that, apparently.
Any given Sunday is my favorite phrase in football, and it showed again this week, not just with this game, but also with the Bengals, who got beat last night in a putrid offensive performance from the Bengals, even worse than Green Bay, in my opinion.
Well, they scored fewer points.
Oh, and it was awful. It was awful. The end zone. The Broncos also are now no longer undefeated, as we talked about. And then a couple other big losses. The Seahawks, we also talked about. That's a big loss for them. We'll talk about what that means later. And also for the Eagles, who had that game in hand at home against Miami. Sam Bradford gets hurt, surprise, and then things fall apart. And that's a big loss for Philadelphia.
Well, it's a big loss because, like you said, they kind of had the game in hand, it felt like. They were winning this game pretty convincingly, but then all of a sudden, you know, the Chris McCain knocked Sam Bradford out of the game, and Mark Sanchez went full Mark Sanchez at the end of the game. When all they needed was a field goal, because it was 20-19 in the fourth quarter. Sanchez has them inside the red zone, goal-to-go situation, and throws a pick. And that kind of, all you have to do is just not turn the ball over there, and you kick the field goal to take the lead. But you know what? It's Mark Sanchez, I guess, and that's kind of what can be expected. And also Sam Bradford, what can be expected. The injury history he has, I'm not exactly sure what is going to be made of him. But yeah, they had this game up. They were up 16-3, and then they just didn't score much the rest of the game. They managed a field goal after the first quarter. That's it. And this is the offense that, I know, Bradford's knocked out, but Sanchez was, he's a competent backup, except when he's throwing interceptions in the red zone to cost you the game.
Right.
So that's rough. But the thing is, they're 4-5 since the Giants lost to the Patriots.
That's the huge part.
The NFC East and the AFC South are two divisions where I think the winner is going to be about 500.
Those divisions are wide open. Yes, I agree. So that's what we had for big wins and big losses this week. We tried to move through it a little quicker than normal, other than obviously the Packers rant. But like I said,
could rant for 10 more minutes.
You deserved it. You definitely deserved it. And the Falcons didn't play, so I didn't have to rant. But that might change next week. You never know. Moving on to our top performers of the week. Go ahead, Elijah. Talk about that quarterback in Washington. And no, it's not Robert Griffin III.
It's Kirk Cousins, baby. They beat the Saints defense so bad that Rob Ryan, spoiler alert, well, maybe we'll discuss that later when it comes to news. But you know why, though? It's hard to argue with when Kirk Cousins just rips your defense 20-25 for 324 yards, 4 touchdown passes. And you know when those 4 touchdown passes came?
First half.
In the first half.
Yes, called it.
Well, I was 3 in the first half. Sorry, I should. He did throw 1 in the second half. But yeah, they were absolutely wrecking this Saints defense. Kirk Cousins had almost as many touchdowns as incompletions. They had Alfred Morris and Matt Jones, and as well as this Chris Thompson guy in his second season, kind of came out of nowhere. But they racked up a ton of yards, almost 200 yards rushing as well. But to go back to Kirk Cousins, this is a guy who's gotten kind of a lot of heat. People aren't sure if he can actually be the long-term guy, but boy, did he look it in this game. And honestly, if you look at his stats on the season, 14 touchdown passes to 9 interceptions, that's not terrible. And he's got the Redskins at 4-5. When people thought, okay, when they put him in as the starting quarterback right after the preseason, it was before week 1, people thought, okay, how long is this going to last before they'll bench him because he turns the ball over too much? Well, he did manage to have some turnovers over the course of the season. The fact is, he has looked like a pro, especially in like 2 out of their last 3 games. The big comeback against Tampa Bay, where he threw 3 touchdowns and no picks, and in this game, when they routed the Saints, he looked every bit of like the starting quarterback that they're going to roll with in the future.
Right, so I mean, obviously we can't make a huge overreaction for being the Saints defense, who is easily the worst in football, most likely in my opinion, other than obviously when the Falcons play. But we won't talk about that. But yeah, I like the way Cousins is playing. Side note, his contract expires this year, and people are getting interested in his possible employment for them next year. I mean, if you miss out on a quarterback in the draft, which I think this year's draft of quarterbacks is pretty heavily loaded, then they might decide to get Cousins. But I'm sure Washington will be interested in keeping him the way that he's been winning them games.
4-5, not bad.
Another side note, I expect Matt Jones to take over for Alfred Morris pretty soon. Morris has been extremely underwhelming, and Matt Jones is impressing me. I believe they drafted him in the 3rd round out of Florida, obviously. Let's see. My biggest performer of the week, definitely Jeremy Langford. I tell you what, this young rookie out of Michigan State has been very impressive the last 2 weeks. This week, 20 carries, 73 yards, and a touchdown, so not a whole lot on the ground. Excuse me. But in the receiving department, though, 7 catches, 109 receiving yards, and another touchdown. You know who this reminds me of?
Who's this remind you of?
Matt Forte. Who does he play for?
The Bears.
Oh, who's Langford play for?
The Bears.
Oh, that's surprising. So, yeah, the thing is, it's so great that the Bears can trust a young back like this, just the same way they trust a star like Matt Forte. Langford has been very impressive in the passing game, and he showed elite speed on that big touchdown, 83-yard screen pass. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. Langford's been huge for Chicago, who's a team that's improving we'll talk about later. But, yeah, I loved what Langford did. I mean, they're using him every way, 27 touches, and it's really great. I mean, I just like the way that this young guy's playing.
You know, speaking of running backs, I don't think there was a running back in all of football, maybe this season, that's had as impressive of a game as Adrian Peterson did for the Minnesota Vikings against a defense that was ranked 5th in the NFL against the run. Peterson goes 26 carries, 203 yards, an 80-yard touchdown at the end to kind of seal the game away, even if it wasn't really in doubt at the time anyways. But 200-yard game, his first of the season, I think his 6th of his career or something to tie.
And also the most rushing yards of any back this season, 203.
He has tied for the most 200-yard games. He's done this more times in his career than just about anyone else in the history of the NFL. And he's doing it at 30 years old. Leads the NFL now in rushing by over 200 yards. He's running away from the field.
It's a wide margin, yes it is. And I'm just, I didn't really
at 30.
I didn't expect this kind of production from Peterson. Remember, didn't he talk about looking for 2,500 rushing yards this year?
Yeah, he was talking about how he wanted to go for 2,500. Everybody was like, okay. But the thing is, if you want to talk about going for 2,000, he did that 3 years ago, 2,097 yards.
He's got a chance.
Fell all of 8 yards short of that rushing single-season record. But you know what? At that time, in that season, through 9 games, which is what we're through right now, he had 957 yards rushing. He has 961 in these first 9 games. I'm not saying he's going to get that 2K, but you know what? He is a little bit ahead of schedule, honestly. He's at the pace or even, just basically indecipherably ahead of it. And he's doing this at 30, which is, the dead age for running backs.
Yep, and
just not Peterson.
If there was going to be somebody that was going to defy this, this whole 30-year-old running back trend, it was definitely going to be Peterson. And I'm kind of happy for him, just the way he's played this year. I mean, aside from all the off-season problems that he had.
But I think that's just motivation. He's just using that to fuel this tear that he has been on lately. He's averaging almost 5 yards a carry on the season. He's found the end zone 5 times. Like I said, leads the NFL in rushing by hundreds of yards, literally. And it's incredibly impressive for the Vikings, who again are surging out of their minds, and it's largely on the back of Peterson, who had more carries than Teddy Bridgewater had passes. Who else do you have as a top performer there, Justin?
Well, this one doesn't really go as top performer per se, but I want to talk about a top performance. And that would be for Ben Roethlisberger, who was forced into the game after Landry Jones hurt his ankle.
He wasn't supposed to play, Mr. Big Ben. He was supposed to get a chance to rest against this really not very good Cleveland Browns team.
And that is what is so impressive for me. The fact that Roethlisberger had to come in. Like I said, his stats weren't exactly performer-worthy per se.
I don't know, 22 of 33, 379 yards, those 3 scores.
It's awesome. It's really, with a 123.9 passer rating. It's awesome, and I just love the way that he played. Just the way he had to come in. He locked on to Antonio Brown, who had another fantastic game, and also for Martavis Bryant, who had an awesome game too. Sorry, I'm going to kind of steal your top performers from you, but those two were phenomenal.
When you have 6 catches for 178 yards like Martavis Bryant did, that's making big plays.
this Steelers offense is phenomenal when Roethlisberger is the quarterback. I think that this is a big performance from Roethlisberger just because he wasn't supposed to play and he had to come in. And if Roethlisberger would have been hurt, Heath Miller would have had to come in and play quarterback, and that would have been a disaster for Pittsburgh. So big performance from the veteran quarterback. So I think you got one more over there for you.
The top performer, as a matter of fact, I think. Don't you want to get to this one? You got your defensive. You want me to? Okay, Zach Miller. I'll go ahead
I want
and
you to talk about Zach Miller.
What exactly did Zach Miller do? I was not aware that there was much of a top performance to be had.
Let these stats blow you away.
Let the stats blow me away. All right, let's look at this. Zach Miller, 5 catches, 107 yards, 2 touchdowns. All right, I'm convinced.
Yeah.
And that is for this Bears offense that managed to put up 37 against the Rams. And
nobody would have predicted that.
No, they would not have. And this is coming from a guy who, of course, had that amazing touchdown to kind of win the game on Monday Night Football.
He's come out of nowhere.
I didn't even realize Zach Miller was still in the league. I thought he was out. I mean, he's 31, but if you look at these stats he's had in the past couple of years, he actually wasn't on a team in 2012, 13, or 14.
That's what I mean.
So, out of nowhere,
he's becoming one of Jay Cutler's favorite targets all of a sudden.
5 for 107 and 2 scores. Well played, Mr. Zach Miller, and that's really impressive. Now we can get to your defensive.
Yeah, are we missing one side of the ball here?
We are missing a side of the ball. Who is it this week, Justin?
Well, if you'd so like to know, there's this rookie who just happens to play for the Oakland Raiders. Drafted at 35th overall in the second round out of Florida State. Mario Edwards Jr. had a great game this week. 11 tackles, 1 coming for a loss, 1 sack, and 2 quarterback hits. For the Raiders, obviously, they didn't come out with the win.
How did that pan out for the Raiders?
It didn't pan out for them, but I'm proud of this young kid. You know, he's playing better. The run defense was awful, but I really liked the way he played, and that's my defensive performer of the week with a lot of production. 11 tackles for a defensive lineman is very impressive. That is
quite impressive, especially considering, as I look at this, no one else really has put up anywhere of that sort of stats on the Raiders. So if he was getting the tackles, or Peterson was running for enormous gains, because he was doing it at the point of the attack. Just the rest of the defense kind of got shredded hardcore. No shame in that necessarily. So that's our top performers for the week. Moving on now to some NFL news. There always seems is there a lot of it recently? Because it just seems like there's all these items. Look at all this stuff we've got to talk about.
I just like to talk about a lot of news. That's all, so we can just glance over.
This is true, but there are big developments at the quarterback positions. There's just people getting cut or signed or whatever, getting canned in a couple of cases. So let's start out with Peyton Manning. We talked about how bad he was against the Chiefs.
Bad.
There's apparently a reason why, and it's medical related. So what exactly is wrong with Peyton Manning, Justin Dade?
So he's been struggling with plantar fasciitis the last 2 weeks or so.
Which doesn't sound good. So what exactly is that?
I am not in any way a doctor, but it does involve the foot. That's all I really know. It's very painful, and it really affects the movement in your foot. But now, apparently, it's gotten worse. It's much worse, and it's turned into a plantar fascia tear. And don't ask me what that entails, because I have no idea.
Because you're not a doctor.
But I know it's not good, and it means that Manning's not going to play next week. Osweiler will play next week for the Broncos.
That is true. Brock Osweiler will get the start, the first of his career.
I'm guessing that'll probably mean at least maybe a couple more after that. We'll have to see. But a lot of it will depend on his recovery and how Brock Osweiler plays, who I like, by the way.
I think he big arm, obviously much
big
more
kid
live.
Too, 6'8".
Big arm, big kid, much more live. Mobility and arm strength than Peyton Manning at this point. But you know what? Peyton Manning on this day, as a matter of fact, broke a pretty important record, the passing yardage record that Brett Favre had held for 8 years. Broke that and then proceeded to throw 4 interceptions. He was 5 of 20 for 35 yards, no touchdowns, and those 4 picks, and a benching that was honestly well-earned, if you will.
Oh, it was well-deserved.
He was terrible in this game that they got wrecked by the Chiefs at home. And there was all this optimism after they had kind of rolled the Packers, and Manning looked like he was back in it.
Yeah.
Had not the greatest game against the Colts, but at least they were close in that one. And in this game, the wheels just fell off because, as I understand it, the plantar fascia tear, the thing is he's got to throw from his entire body, kind of plant with the foot and drive off the foot. But he can't drive off it anymore because he has a tear in the muscle. And therefore, I don't know if and when he'll come back. I assume there will be some at some point, Gary Kubiak did say, look, when he's healthy again, which is not now, obviously, he's pretty banged up and he has a huge tear in his, in that plantar fascia. If and when he's healthy, he'll be starting. Whenever that happens, I don't know, but it's just not looking good for Peyton. And you just feel like this might be about the end for one of the greats that there ever was. But 4 interceptions, 5 completions.
Yeah.
It was awful, and he is down for the count right now.
Obviously a terrible game for Manning, but I do want to point out, how great of a career it's been. Not saying it's over yet, but yeah, that passing yards record is fantastic, and the just to be able to watch him for most of his, well, not most of his career, but just about it. We're near that right age, and he's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. If he would have been able to win a couple more Super Bowls, I tell you, he would be.
There'd be no doubt.
And there's still a chance he could win one possibly this year. You never know. But Cairo Santos, the kicker for the Chiefs, had the same amount of field goals as Peyton Manning had completions in this game.
Ooh, yeah,
so,
you don't want that.
That's just an interesting tidbit of information. Also, another
fun
stats.
Interesting.
If you don't know, if you've never heard of Pro Football Focus before, it's a website and an organization that focuses on grading individual players throughout a game. And I'm not sure how long they've been around, but I would say 5 or 10 years or so. But they gave Peyton Manning the worst grade they've ever given out for a quarterback since they've been around, and that is huge. I believe his grade was a negative 11 point something.
How do you get a negative grade?
Well, I'm sure there's systems for it, and they have it on their website that breaks it down, but I'm sure the incompletions and the interceptions and no touchdowns and 35 yards has a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
So he received the lowest grade they've ever handed out for a quarterback ever, which is crazy.
So yeah, I don't know if you could call this a benching or you call this like an injury-related demotion, but the fact is he kind of got benched perhaps for health reasons. Another QB got benched actually. This one for performance reasons. After we had talked about how the Bears rolled up on the Saints, or not the Saints, I should say St. Louis. St. Louis benched Nick Foles, who of course they acquired in the offseason, benched for Case Keenum of all people. After that drubbing, and the fact is, Nick Foles hasn't been very good this year. But I'm not sure.
Averaging under 200 yards a game.
I did not really see this coming. Did you?
See what? Oh, yeah.
The benching, the demotion.
Yeah, I guess I didn't really expect it. I mean, they gave a lot for. I mean, they didn't give a lot for Foles, but they entrusted Nick Foles to be their starting quarterback. He's played awful.
Well, they had Sam Bradford, and they said, you know what, we will take Foles from you, Philadelphia, and we think that that's a worthwhile trade, and perhaps even an upgrade, or at least comparable. And the fact is, Bradford hasn't been lighting it up necessarily either.
But a little better.
And now, so he's hurt. I'm not exactly sure for how long, but Foles is not hurt. He's just been benched because he completed, on the season, 56% of his passes, 6.6 yards per attempt, one more touchdown than interception, 7-6. So not a ton of those, either one of those. Just not good.
Yeah, I mean, this may be something to jumpstart the team. I don't really know. But it doesn't really matter. All I know is that the Rams are going to be looking for a quarterback this offseason, most likely in the draft. And I would say that the Rams are about a quarterback away from being a pretty dangerous team with the way they can run the ball. They got a young offensive line that's only going to get better.
Their defense is,
usually pretty good, other than I don't know what happened to them this week.
Neither do I.
But yes, I mean, I think they need a little more secondary help. But other than that, like I said, I think the Rams are a quarterback away from being pretty dangerous. So yeah, this is interesting. I'm sure they'll be looking for quarterback help in the offseason. Let's see, what else you got here?
You know who they wouldn't be able to sign, or maybe they will, but he's getting his audition, he's getting his chance, and that is Johnny Manziel for more quarterback news.
All right, yeah.
And I'm not sure if this is kind of just, I think this is what they should have done. They're 2-8 now, as they've lost again, kind of got beat by the Steelers pretty bad. But it's not like Manziel was terrible in this game. He actually threw for 372 yards.
He fumbled on the first play he came in.
Okay.
But yeah, I think this is the right decision from Mike Pettin. I don't say this a whole lot.
To clarify, that the decision is he's going to start the rest of the season, so that's their final 6 games, and now they're going to go to bye week. Really kind of a late bye week here in the season, one of the last teams that have it. But they're going to start him to just play out the string and see what happens. And I guess I would say, why not?
That's what I'm getting here.
The fact is, they're not going anywhere. They need to see what they have. And Manziel did not look completely lost out there.
And I think, Manziel's getting a little bit better, and he's gotten a little more mature, which isn't saying a whole lot because he's got a long way to go yet. But I think this is a good decision just because, he's got to play sometime. They got to see what he can do. And it's This is going to be big for Manziel because if they can see that he has some promise, then they aren't going to actively pursue a quarterback in the offseason, but they're going to anyway. It just depends on how seriously they consider it. But this is huge for Manziel. I mean, it's going to be a lower pressure type situation. They're 2-8.
The season's over. So
the season's
just
over.
See what you have, and maybe he can, either audition for the starting job in Cleveland or perhaps another team. Speaking of quarterbacks returning, apparently the cavalry is returning in terms of Big D in Dallas because Tony Romo is coming back. Apparently, this is the week he's going to return to the lineup, playing against the Dolphins, and that also means that, I guess, kind of to bring him back, the Cowboys cut Brandon Weeden. Not perhaps surprising there, just kind of as a side note. But Romo's coming back. They are 2-7 and have lost 7 straight, but that division really hasn't gotten away from them. So, I mean, take that for what it's worth. Romo is making his return this upcoming Sunday.
And unfortunately, he's making his return about 3 weeks too late. The Cowboys season is over.
They had the game against Tampa Bay, though. They only scored 6 points, but they could have won the game 6-3. Less than a minute to go. They had... they could have just kept Tampa Bay out of the end zone.
Yeah.
Jameis Winston manages to score a rushing touchdown to win the game.
Cowboys season is over.
If they could have just won one of those games, though, they would only be 2 games back, or a game and a half or whatever, back of the Giants, who are leading, and kind of put that in air quotes.
You can't say their season is over, but it sure seems like it. They are far behind. Let's see. Oh, yeah, the big news we haven't touched on yet. Julian Edelman, the wide receiver for the Patriots, one of Tom Brady's favorite targets, is going to miss 6 to 8 weeks, which is a very long time with a broken foot.
It's the rest of the regular season at the very least.
It's very possible that Edelman comes back for the playoffs, but until then they're going to be without him, and that's huge because he's been phenomenal this year.
Well, he has been absolutely spectacular this year and the last several years, and I don't know how many more of these sort of hits to the offense the Patriots can take before the offense starts to struggle, because Deion Lewis is now done for the season, and Edelman goes out as well. I guess you're left with Amendola. And Gronkowski's obviously still fantastic, but the thing is, Edelman is kind of the guy that underratedly makes that offense go, and I don't think people are going to realize that until he's out.
And the other thing, too, you forgot to mention there, without Nate Solder at left tackle and Ryan Wendell also at guard, so the Patriots really hurting on offense, but that's why I said there's a big win for them to prove that they could do it without all these star players. But, yeah, I don't think that the Patriots are probably going to end up undefeated any longer, just because of all the injuries they're dealing with. But if there's a quarterback that can make a team better, and the players around him, it's Tom Brady, because he's done it before in seasons past when he didn't have a whole lot of help. So yeah, that's big for the Patriots. They're going to be without a lot of offensive weapons for a while.
Key offensive pieces on the offensive line, running back, and now wide receiver injuries. It may take a toll at some point, like you said, perhaps even in the win column, because they almost lost this one.
So yeah, some other news. We got some wide receivers heading to the IR. First, Victor Cruz was injured. He had torn ACL last year. And then they were hoping to get him back around mid-season. We've been waiting for a while. Find out now he's got also a calf injury, and that's going to force him to miss the rest of the season. So they put him on injured reserve. Unfortunately, we aren't going to be able to see Odell Beckham Jr. and Cruz in the field at the same time. It still has never happened.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll get to see that next year. I hope a good recovery for Cruz. And they also signed again Hakeem Nicks back to their roster now that Cruz is out for the season.
He's kind of bounced around, obviously.
Yeah, I don't expect a whole lot from Cruz, but maybe you'll have, or a lot from Nicks, but maybe you'll have a type of reunion James Jones had earlier in the season with Green Bay. You never know. And also Brashad Perriman, the rookie wide receiver for the Ravens, we were also expecting to see later this season. We found out he will not. He got put on injured reserve for the Ravens. And the Ravens' struggles continue. We won't talk about them because apparently you don't let me anymore.
But we also have this other piece of news, one last little kind of item here. Aldon Smith, who of course has gotten in more trouble than I thought it was even humanly possible to do between like performance-enhancing drugs, like substance abuse and stuff, some DUI, vandalism, hit-and-run charges, just like... I didn't know if he was going to come back into the league, but the Raiders gave him a chance. He was actually playing decently well there, but apparently now he faces a year-long suspension just of, like, all of those things combined.
Yeah.
And, like, past record and transgression stuff, but this is substance abuse. And it's just not good. This guy had all the talent you could possibly imagine. He had 33.5 sacks in his first 2 years in the league. That was an NFL record for the most sacks he managed to pile up in your first 2 years in the NFL. And now, I'm not sure exactly what will become of him, but if he does get slapped with a year-long suspension, that's probably it. I don't think anyone's going to want to... Maybe they still will, just because of all the talent that's there, but he has too much trouble for what he's worth.
It's really sad, that stat you brought up with the 33 sacks in 2 years. Like you said, this guy had all the talent in the world. This is really sad that a guy would just throw away his talent for all of this stuff that he's had. In my opinion, he should be banned from the NFL. I'm sick and tired of hearing about him. He should be banned for all the stuff you listed. It's ridiculous. I'm sorry. But yeah, I don't think he will have another NFL job the rest of his career with this suspension looming now. So maybe he will be banned on not technically, but will be because nobody's probably going to want to take a shot on him. Some other news also, last bit, the Saints fired Rob Ryan, defensive coordinator, with the worst defense in football they've given up.
So what happens when you give up almost 50 to Washington?
And some crazy large amount of yards this year. I don't know what it is. What the weird part about this is that the rumors came about it, that Ryan was fired. And everybody's like, oh, it's about time, Rob Ryan's fired. But then Sean Payton came on an interview later in the day and said, Rob Ryan's absolutely not fired. He's still my defensive coordinator.
And then he absolutely was fired.
And then a couple hours later, we find out that, he actually was fired. So, weird media problems there with that. And it's possible Sean Payton could be coaching somewhere else next year as well. There's been rumors about that.
After the Saints have lost 2 straight games, one they should have won and one they got blown out in, yeah, I think there might be some questions about his job security for sure.
So that's about all we had for news. We have some brief discussion topics. I mean, we discussed about the Packers. You just talked about them already. We talked about the Broncos enough. So I'm going to admit and first say off that I was wrong about the Seattle Seahawks. I really was.
I'm not sure that you were wrong, just because what you're suggesting is that you thought, okay, don't write this team off when they were, 2-4 at one point?
Right.
And so then they had won a couple games, and they probably could have had this one too. They had the lead in the fourth quarter, but they couldn't actually get stops on defense at the end of the game once again. So now they're 4-5. They're 3 back of the Cardinals. They're not going to catch them.
No, they won't.
But as far as wild cards go, I mean, they're a couple games behind, like, say, even the Packers, who are now in second place behind the Vikings in a wild card spot. As they are free-falling, yes, but they are basically 3 games behind the Packers with that tiebreaker from earlier in the season. So maybe it is that Seattle missed the playoffs, question mark?
That's what I think might actually happen. This team has yet to come around, and it's not really frustrating, but I was expecting a turnaround for Seattle, and they may get one, but I just don't think it's going to be enough. They're fighting for one wild card spot, if you ask me, because I think Green Bay and Minnesota are both locked for the playoffs. And I still like my Atlanta Falcons at 6-3 a little bit here, so I think it's gonna be tough for Seattle to make the playoffs. And it's just really disappointing. That it's been a disappointing season for Jimmy Graham. The Seahawks, they're saying they don't use him correctly, and I agree completely with that. Having watched Jimmy Graham a lot as a Falcons fan and watching him score touchdowns against everybody.
They have not utilized him. Lynch has been in and out of the lineup. They now have cut Christine Michael, and he got cut again from the Cowboys, but he was supposed to maybe be the guy that could step in for Lynch, but no, not exactly. And again, the defense is probably the biggest disappointment, because how many games they had? The game against the Panthers, they had the game against the Bengals, where they gave up huge leads and scores at the end of the game to cost them the game, and then it happened again where they gave up 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns to basically go from leading the game to losing the game at home against the Cardinals. So, yeah, I really do think the Seattle Seahawks, I'm not going to say they're done, because this team can obviously get on a roll, but the fact is, I think they kind of were like, okay, we'll be fine. This game, it didn't look like it, because it's the same things again. The defense is no longer able to shut people down. They give up 39 points.
I think it has something to do with Dan Quinn not being there anymore. I hate to be the Falcons homer here, but Dan Quinn meant a lot to that Seattle defense. He had a lot of the edge, the grit, the hype about it, and they played with swagger. I don't see that as much anymore on the Seattle defense. And the only difference on their roster is really the cornerbacks is the only thing that's really changed over the last couple of years.
And they still have some of the great pieces in the secondary as they used to.
It doesn't get any better than Wagner, Sherman, Chancellor, Thomas. It doesn't get any better than that.
And yet, 4-5, just kind of in trouble, lost some division games especially, and so now they have managed to, in the division 1-2. So there maybe you could still catch up to some people and surpass them. Maybe they can sneak into the playoffs, and obviously no one would probably want them if they did, but right. I'm not sure they're getting there. Also, we talked a little bit earlier about how the Bears are all of a sudden also 4-5, but it's a different kind of 4-5, because it's like, wow, the Bears managed to make it up to 4-5. They looked like a lost season early on.
Oh, good Lord.
They looked off, like when they played the Seahawks, for example, and got shut out. But now, Jay Cutler, very quietly, I think this maybe isn't quite as quiet anymore, but I'm going to give him a little bit of love after all the crap he's taken, and deservedly so, for being terrible, like in particular last year. This year, 13 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Those 5 picks, that's not bad.
No.
And he's not the reason they lose games, if they lose games anymore.
And I'll be the first to praise Jay Cutler for what he's done this year. I'm impressed with this Bears team. They don't have a whole lot of talent on defense right now, and they transitioned to the 3-4 defense, so they're trying a lot of new things and plugging in a lot of players that are new. But the pass rush has been key for them. That's always been good. Pernell McPhee and let's see who else they got back there.
I'm honestly not sure.
Lamar Houston, also a pass rusher.
Yes.
So I like what they can do rushing the passer, but the offense, especially, they played this game without Matt Forte. You know, Alshon Jeffrey's been hurt. Jeffrey didn't do anything in this game either. Janoris Jenkins shut him down. So the fact that
it's with Jeremy Langford and with
Zach Miller
and Zach, like, and this is really quite impressive from a guy that everybody wanted to be run out of town on a rail, you know. But as a matter of fact, he has got the Bears playing better than I think just about anybody expected them to, and better. He's playing better than anyone expected him to, because the turnovers they're not nearly as bad as they've been in the past, not even close. So give Jay Cutler some credit. A team that's actually won all of their games this year, and we can talk Panthers, Patriots. Justin, what do you make of these two teams? They're the only undefeated teams left, as we talked about. The Bengals dropped one in at home against Houston, so it's Patriots, Panthers, both 9-0. What do you make of them?
Well, yeah, this is the last piece of discussion we're going to have for this podcast, and I wanted to talk to you. These teams are undefeated. It's amazing. Has it 2 9-0 teams this deep in the season? It's pretty impressive.
I guess I'm not sure when the last time that may have happened. Well, I think a couple years back we had the Saints and the Colts were both, that the year they met in the Super Bowl. They both started off 12-13-0 or something like that. Both of them lost, but I don't suppose either of these teams are going undefeated, do you?
That's what I don't like. I touched on. I don't think the Patriots are going to wind up going undefeated any longer. I think they may drop a division game or maybe a game later in the season where it doesn't matter. They're without a lot of offensive weapons, and I think they should be a little concerned on the offensive side. Defense still playing great football though, but. You know, the Carolina Panthers, if you want to pull up their schedule really quick, it's possible.
I just don't think so. Like, undefeated is so hard to do, and the Panthers aren't overwhelming anybody. I mean, they beat up on Tennessee pretty bad, but that's Tennessee.
Look at the schedule
the
and tell me.
The defense is great. The offense kind of is inconsistent. They're playing Washington. Okay, Washington, as good as they looked against the Saints, not probably actually that good. They got the Cowboys, who are basically just done at this point. That's a Thanksgiving game. They have New Orleans, who I guess can give them a run, and Atlanta. Division games. That's the thing. There's still 4 division games left on here. Both of them against the Falcons, 2 in essentially 3-week time.
That's not an easy game in New York either. So I guess it's not as easy as I thought. So
there are some, but these are all teams that are like 4-5, 5-5, or like the Falcons, who are slipping badly.
6-3, right?
And you also have like Dallas and Tampa Bay, who are, I don't suppose, either very good. But the fact is, I don't think either of those teams are going undefeated, but they do look like the presumptive favorites, especially as other teams lose. And really pretty impressive that Carolina's pulling this off. I don't think anybody expected this from them, especially with the wide receiver injuries. But they're doing it with Greg Olsen, Devin Funchess, and a great running game and an amazing defense. And Cam Newton, who's just making enough plays and not screwing things up.
Yeah, the big thing for me with Carolina has been that offensive line. I mean, they're really playing. I mean, they plug in Michael Oher at left tackle, who was kicked out of Baltimore with the big
he was
contract.
Bad.
Yeah, he's terrible. The big contract they gave him. They got a lot of no-namers on the offensive line, and I'm really impressed with how they've played and have protected Cam Newton and allowed, especially to run the football better. But yeah, I tell you what, if you improve that offensive line a little bit and draft one more weapon for Newton in the offseason, and then you come back with Olsen and Benjamin and a better Funchess and then this new guy they put together, I tell you what, it could be a scary offense in Carolina.
To go along with the scary defense, forget about the offseason. This could be their year in the NFC. And the Cardinals are a big threat. The Vikings are emerging. The Packers are receding. And it's hard to say exactly where that will shake out. But they've got a 2-game lead for home field. And I think the road to the NFC to the Super Bowl goes through Carolina.
And I mean, it's not one of the toughest places to play in the world. Carolina doesn't.
Not necessarily, but it's a tough team to play.
Yeah.
Ask anybody who's played them this year. Literally anyone.
Before we move to the Fantasy Minute, though, I want to ask you, is it possible that the Panthers are better than the Patriots right now?
Is it possible? Well, if the Patriots keep losing key pieces, then maybe the Panthers will slip past them. But
they
right now,
tomorrow.
Right now, I'm going to say no.
Okay.
I have too much faith in Brady,
Me too.
Belichick, and the fact that the Patriots defense seems to come up with a lot of turnovers. The defense is being not quite equal. I'd say the Panthers' better defense, but I think the offense is much more sophisticated. Even with the pieces it's lost, it's Brady. It's just like Tom Brady's as good as it gets, and I would give the edge to the Patriots.
I would too. And the thing that Bill Belichick does so well is they take away your best weapon, and I bet you they would do everything they could to take Greg Olsen away from Cam Newton. They would probably be pretty successful, especially with the two athletic linebackers they have in Hightower and Collins, who has actually missed the last 2 games with an illness, I believe is what he's had. But yeah. So, we'll move on to our traditional part of the piece where I talk about our fantasy football studs and duds of the week here in Week 10. This is my weekly article I put out on fantasypros.com, and a shout-out to them for allowing me this opportunity. But yeah, our 3 studs, we talked about Jeremy Langford already, 29 points for Langford. If you had him in PPR, that'd be 36.
Oh, man.
Antonio Brown, 27 points. He had 10 catches. Again, if you had him in PPR, that's 37 points. And then Brown is just a PPR machine. I mean, he sees so many targets every game.
Absolute.
And Adrian Peterson, again, rumbled right over the Raiders, 27 points. The honorable mentions, Cousins we talked about, Charkandrick West we talked about, and also Matt Jones, as I briefly touched upon. A lot of players that you don't see a whole lot up near the top this week. And for duds, it doesn't get any worse than Peyton Manning.
No.
Negative 7 fantasy points this week. Unheard of.
It'd be better to have not started a quarterback if you had Manning as your QB.
And I think most fantasy owners probably know if you have Manning, you probably haven't been starting him for a while. But definitely don't put him anywhere near your starting lineup, obviously, because he's hurt. Alshon Jeffrey, like I mentioned, pretty quiet in this game. He came in with a groin injury. The problem is, he listed him as active. Fantasy owners thought they might need him to beat a good Rams team, but they didn't need him. This is a classic example of a team who's just blowing out the opposition and doesn't need to test an injured star. And then Sammy Watkins, we also talked about 1 point on the game for Watkins, struggled with drops early in the game. And it wasn't just Revis. He got separation from Revis earlier in the game, but again, the drops really killed him. The other not so honorable mentions, Travis Kelce, not so much for Kansas City. D'Angelo Williams finally slowed down for Pittsburgh. And Dez Bryant was very underwhelming for the Cowboys in their loss to Tampa Bay.
That is correct. We've got your fantasy studs and duds. I want to hit the power rankings quick. Elliot Harrison, NFL.com. He has the Patriots and Panthers at the top of the. That's not exactly surprising. The Bengals moved down 1 spot because they had their loss. He has the Cardinals as the 4th best team. Do you buy into the Cardinals as being better than anybody besides those 3 teams that were either undefeated or just lost?
I mean, after watching what the Bengals did last night, I would maybe even consider the Cardinals at 3.
That's possible. I mean, their win over Seattle, who is kind of surging a little bit, much better than losing at home and only putting up 6 points against the Texans. So I think Bengals, Cardinals, they're kind of the top tier. Obviously, got undefeated teams, but then those 2 teams, and he has the Vikings leapfrogging the Packers, which I think is totally fair. I'm surprised the Packers are still up at high as 6. The Vikings, the thing is, I don't know if I can trust Bridgewater yet, but I know their defense is very solid.
Oh, yeah.
If not spectacular, and Peterson is just as good as it gets. Bridgewater isn't making bad mistakes to cost them games, and they've won 5 straight.
And that's exactly what Bridgewater has to do. All he has to do is make sure not to lose the game. I mean, he's developing as a quarterback. He's not an elite passer like Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees and Tom Brady. And that's just not the quarterback he is. They need him to be, a little bit better than a game manager with the defense they have, and I like it. I think that he can do good things for Minnesota, and he's a little underrated. So at 7, I love seeing Pittsburgh there at number 7. I think this team is heating up even without all the injuries they've had on offense.
No, I mean, they managed to be up at 6-4. Now they're going into the bye week. Roethlisberger get a chance to get a little bit healthy. He wasn't even supposed to play, but played fantastically. The Broncos dropping 4 spots. That's deserved. They look just absolutely miserable. He actually has the Giants jumping up 3 spots because of how well they played against the Patriots and almost beating them. But I guess they're 5-5 and winning that division. Again, winning kind of in air quotes because they're really pretty pathetic. The Bills have jumped 4 spots to 11, and I guess that's probably just because they're really, we've talked about this every week, there's a dearth of
after
good
the
teams.
Top 10, it gone.
Plummets. Raiders and Jets moved down a little bit because of some losses.
No way the Raiders deserve to still be at 12. No way.
I think The thing is, their offense really can do some things. They didn't quite so much in this game against a good Vikings defense, but Derek Carr, Amari Cooper, Latavius Murray, Michael Crabtree, they can do some things.
Just missing a million pieces on defense.
They just got bulldozed by Peterson, and that's, again, there's no real shame in that. The Dolphins managed to jump up 5 spots by beating the Eagles, who are now below them, who dropped 3 spots. So, I mean, it's all of this was just dreck. And honestly, from the rest of that, I'm just going to take a peek at the bottom here. Oh, my Jags. The Jacksonville Jaguars are 1 game out of first place.
All right. I tell you what.
With my man, Blake Bortles.
And we touched on they're going to be wearing their all puke yellow uniforms on Thursday night. If you want to check that out in their Color Rush game that Nike is doing with the NFL on Thursday night, Titans will be in their all light blue, and yes, the Jags will be in puke yellow.
If you want to look it up or don't, honestly, maybe don't even watch the game. Titans versus Jaguars. But I mean, the thing is, one of those teams might be relevant because there's 4-5 Colts, 4-5 Texans, and 3-6 Jaguars. If the Jaguars can win some games, maybe they can win the division at 6-10 or something.
Their offense is improving just like the Raiders is too. You know, I like Allen Robinson has been a stud this year, and Yeldon's picking it up. And again, they're missing a million pieces on defense.
So the Lions managed to jump 4 spots because they beat the Packers, and at the bottom of the power rankings now is the Cleveland Browns, and that's kind of hard to argue with. They looked really pretty bad, and they're just kind of going to play out the string with Manziel. So that's the power rankings. It's a top-heavy league. We've said it every week, and it continues to be so. I don't suppose any one of these 5-4, 4-5 teams, maybe one of them will blossom into a 10-6 kind of playoff team, but other than that, it looks like got 2 9-0 teams. Yeah, you're going to have a lot of teams that are just not as good, and the parity seems to be a little bit weak this year. Kind of what the NFL strives for, having this any given Sunday. Yeah, that can still happen, but it looks like there's some teams that are really separating themselves in the playoff picture, which transitions nicely to a little playoff picture to wrap up the show. So what do we got right now? If the old cliche, the season ended today, it doesn't. It's got 6 more weeks left, but what happens if it did?
So yeah, for our first round buys in the AFC, we got the Patriots and the Bengals. And then the NFC, we got the Panthers and the Cardinals. Packers dropping out of that first round bye scenario. Cardinals moving up.
They're dropping out of the division lead scenario.
Also, yes. And if the season ended today, playoff wild card matchups would include the Bills heading to Denver, the Steelers going to Indianapolis, the Falcons would head to Minnesota, where they would get absolutely destroyed, and the Packers would head to MetLife to take on the Giants. Well, that would be an interesting game, I would say.
Maybe they could get into a shootout. Actually, probably not. Their offense is really bad, but the Giants is really good.
So yeah, just some couple teams in the hunt. Quick, the Jets and the Chiefs. We talked about the Chiefs. They're right there, 4-5. Raiders still 4-5, but the Jets 5-4 on top in the hunt in the AFC. In the NFC,
look at all those 4-5 teams in the NFC. So like
the Redskins,
all this kind of
are
stuff
there in the playoff hunt. You know, the wild card is weak in the NFC right now, and that's what I want to talk about here. Quick, who do you like for the wild card in the NFC?
Well, I think the fact is the 2 teams that are there right now, especially earlier on in the season, were winning the division, and they were both 5-0 at one point. Both of these teams are 1-3 since then, and are really fading fast. But the thing is, I don't know that there's another team coming up to really take it away. Redskins, Buccaneers, Rams, Seahawks, all of them, well, I guess not all of them lost last week, obviously not, because the Redskins and Bucks won, but I refuse to believe that those teams can actually make a run for the playoffs.
I think you're right.
So maybe we are left with Packers. Maybe they'll get it together and actually come back and take it from the Vikings. But I think Packers and Vikings are both pretty safe bets to make the playoffs, perhaps, especially with some of the tiebreakers they hold against. You know, Packers have beaten the Rams and the Seahawks, for example. But there's all these 4-5 teams. Is one of them either going to make a run for it, or we're going to be left with these reeling Falcons and Packers, our teams, that we're going to watch apparently lose not only the division, but probably sink to a wild card spot if they even hold that, and then maybe get wrecked by an actual good division winner. I don't know.
Yeah, personally, I think this NFC playoff picture is going to stay the same 6 teams. I think, obviously, that the seeds and stuff are going to flip-flop a bunch. But, yeah, the Rams have no consistency. We saw that. The Bears put up 37 on them. Don't believe in the Redskins or the Buccaneers. The Seahawks we talked about. Don't believe in them anymore. Well, I don't know. We'll see. The Bears are really the only team that are playing well at this point.
Playing consistently well with a couple of wins here and just kind of playing better in general. I don't know that the Bears have what it takes. Who knows? It's just one of those things where the thing is, the Packers and Falcons are trying to lose their playoff spots with how poorly they played over the last month, but nobody's rising up to take it from them. The AFC is a little bit more perhaps challenging, but there's you go past the Jets and all the other teams are 4-5, so it's really hard to say. But I think this playoff picture is really top heavy. It's going to be an interesting fight for those first round buys. And other than that, at the bottom of it, someone's either going to rise up or we're going to be left with kind of what we've had. And we'll see if those teams can actually make a run.
I got one more question for you before we close the show. Again, we thank you guys for tuning in. But Elijah, can the Minnesota Vikings actually win the North?
Right now, I'm going to say that they probably can because the defense. If you want to talk Packers versus Vikings, the Vikings defense right now looks better to me. Their running game is incredibly better. And right now, Teddy Bridgewater, not a very good quarterback, but Rodgers can't seem to pull the rest of the team up with him because he is just not making the players around him better. I know there's a lot of injuries, but he's not managed to pull them out of their slump. And come on, it was the Lions. It was the Lions, for crying out loud. So right now, they are going into Minnesota on Sunday, 3:25 or whatever that time that game starts. Huge matchup.
Oh,
they win it. They win it. Now
game.
they have the division tied up and a tiebreaker. They'll both be at 7-3. Lose it, you'll be 2 games back, and you'll have a tiebreaker that they will own over you. The Packers had better get it together, and if they don't, then the Vikings will win the division by winning Sunday. It will be pretty much over.
Boy, I tell you what, let's look at Minnesota's schedule the rest of the season. Yep, they have Green Bay next week. Then they head to Atlanta. I'm not expecting us to win, but that's no easy win for Minnesota. Then they have at home against Seattle, and then on the road to Arizona. Those 4 games are tough.
Those are tough, and the Bears are improving. The Giants have an awful lot of offense.
And then the last game's in Lambeau. So I mean, I'm not convinced yet. I still think the Packers are going to win this division. It's going to be close. And
you're a little more optimistic than I am about the team that I love.
But yeah, I think that last game, Week 17, January 5th at home against Green Bay, or January 3rd at home against Green Bay, could decide the division.
I think it will unless the Packers' tailspin continues and the Vikings keep surging. And it's going to be hard for them to surge through the rest of this tough slate. But the Packers still have to play the Cardinals, for example, and right now, I think the Vikings are absolutely rolling. The Packers are absolutely slumping, and we'll see what to make of that game. But right now, the Vikings, they are a freight train rumbling down the tracks. I'm a little scared if I'm the Packers. They've got to get it together, and if they don't, a 4-game losing streak, yeesh, not good. But we are all out of time. And students of the game, so this is Elijah Freeman for Justin Dade signing off on Week 10 in the NFL. It's been a fascinating time to be a football fan, and we will continue to watch this weekend's games with interest and intrigue. Thank you for joining us.